Welcome back to another episode of LKT Sports Talk. I'm Ben. How you doing, Alex?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Sad hockey's over, but it was a fun series, so it'll be fun to discuss it.
Yep. Hockey is certainly over for the next little bit, or at least the NHL is. But I mean, for today, we'll take a before we get started. We'll take a look at the Locker Token website. It's pretty nice looking. We got a little feature here going on with the Oshawa Generals. How you doing? We have every single detail you need about this company is on this site. How to buy all investment, everything there is to know is on here. It's pretty good looking. We got some pretty good people making these websites. Not so bad. So check it out. Links in bio, and we'll dive right into the Stanley Cup winners. Again, NHL is over, but there's always good to it because we get an excellent team winning a cup. Every team that wins is good for the most part. Vegas is just, as we've said 100 times, they deserve that, man. Like, they deserve that cup so bad. They took out Florida 4-1. They were looking good. And this was the thing for me that I'm like, you know what? This is how you know that this is the team that you don't mess around with when push comes to shove. When the Stanley Cup is in that building, what's the final score? 9-3, right? If that doesn't prove that Vegas is the team, I don't know what does. So, Alex, what'd you think of the final?
Yeah, man. I mean, it was a good series. What I wish we saw was a little bit more of what Florida had coming into it, because I feel like that's where the series ended up as 4-1, was Florida's kind of magic seemed to run out. I mean, Tkachuk obviously was sort of playing in hero mode for the first 3 rounds, and the man was pretty damn broken by the end of it. I mean, it's honestly ridiculous that he played game 4 and was, I mean, give or take, their most effective player still. Like, it's too bad that they lost the series, because that performance could go down as like the Patrice Bergeron, like, all-timer, But I mean, Florida, like I said, they just kind of ran out of gas. Bobrovsky wasn't quite the same goalie we saw in the previous 3 rounds. And Vegas, I mean, obviously they made it to the cup final for a reason themselves, and they just sort of exerted their will throughout. I mean, pretty much the whole series. All right, like you said, that 9-3 finish in the final game to seal the cup. I mean, you wouldn't have Matthew Tkachuk there, even if he was there. It definitely was good that he wasn't, but it just showed Vegas was going to, seal this up. I kind of thought that maybe Florida would find some last little bit of magic, just because it felt like that's how their run had gone this whole time, right? Even against Boston, like, they were down in that series, and then they just came back and made it to the cup final out of it. But it was some good hockey, but definitely I'm happy for Vegas. They were a great team, a very thoroughly built team, right? You like talents that they've got all throughout their roster, lines 1 through 4 on offense, and the 3 deep pairs. And I mean, Aiden Hill was acquired for a 4th-round pick last year. So everyone talking about trading your entire roster for Connor Hellebuyck. I mean, he's definitely great, and it's good to have a solid track record. But I was a goalie once before, and I can agree that it's kind of voodoo.
Yeah, I mean, you never know where you're going to get it from, right? Like, Aiden Hill just, like, he's not, I wouldn't say struggled throughout his career so far, but he just hasn't found his mark. But you know what? Oh, boy, he found it for sure with this team. Now, again, is it the team in front of him? I'm sure that helps the confidence. Absolutely. But, I mean, you know what? Like, well-deserved, man. And Marchessault taking home the Conn Smythe. Like, oh, my God. The guy was 13 goals, 12 assists, 25 points in 22 games. Like, come on. That's so good. like incredible. Like, but if I could give the entire team the Conn Smythe, obviously they got the cup, but you know what I mean? Like, players of the playoffs, I give them, to all of them. Like, no one was like, Marchessault was fantastic, don't get me wrong, but he was the best on the team for sure, but it's everybody, man. That whole team is what won them. And that was a full-on team effort, as people love to say. So, you could have given that up to Eichel. You could have given that to Stone for getting a hat trick in a bloody final, right? Like, like anybody. You could have given it to Hill. Like, you know what I mean? Like, every single player did their job on that team. And obviously it led to the first ever Stanley Cup for the team. Is it their 7th season? Yep. I want to say. First cup in 7 seasons, and the bloody Leafs are how long now? That's okay. But yeah, boo for sure. But yeah, I mean, it was super super fun. So I gotta ask because I've been kind of thinking about this. I'll ask you, Alex. Is Vegas the new Tampa? And when I say the new Tampa, I mean, are they going to be there next year and the year after that? Are they the next dynasty team?
I think so. It's tough to say they're the next Tampa because Tampa was just that league leading type, right? Like Vegas wasn't front of year to end of year the league leading Western Conference team. They were solid, they were good, but they weren't that step far and away. And I think that's because they've been willing to use this wiggle room of LTIR, use this extra space you can create with cap shenanigans and really just go after good talents and add good players when you can. If the guy's hurt, sorry man, we're probably trading you if we can get some value for you, and if more importantly, if we can bring somebody else in that's going to perform in the lineup.
Yeah,
and I mean that's obviously it's a bit harsh, right? Guys like Max Pacioretty, I mean they probably would have loved to have been a part of this still somehow, but it's the business, and it's shown throughout this cup and building this team that they have that you got to be ruthless in management and you got to make decisions based on winning and winning when it matters, right? I'm a big fan of the Leafs, obviously a big fan of what they've done in the regular season, but I can admit that they needed to make some changes and maybe make them sooner than they did to compete better in the playoffs and to have that more playoff ready team. And that's what Vegas is, man. There's a bunch of, what's your favorite term? There's a bunch of big bastards on this team, right?
Yes,
Alex
Pietrangelo,
right? Alex Pietrangelo, Shea Theodore, right? These big defensemen that are intimidating, but also are silky smooth with the puck and on their feet, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you keep bringing talents like that in that can snap the puck around, make a tape-to-tape pass, and take a good shot on net. I think they're absolutely going to be a Western Conference contender for as long as they keep up this relatively good asset management.
Yep.
Right. And until they sort of run out of pieces completely, which maybe that happens in 4 years and you got to reset. But hey, they won a cup already. So,
Yeah, they got it. I mean,
you take it.
Yeah, you take everything you can there for sure. Me personally, I kind of think they are, man. I'm looking at the roster and I'm like, well, who are they really gonna lose? Right? When you look at like the last maybe 2 seasons, Tampa kind of lost a couple of their good key players, right? What was his name? Blake Coleman. There was a few. They didn't lose Coleman, but Palat, Gord, a bunch of guys. Exactly right. They lost some good players, right? So that kind of loses your depth, of course, when you have Palat and Yanni Gord playing on second and third line. I think even fourth for a couple nights. Come on, that's what Vegas is right now, right now. They have guys on excellent contracts, excellent contracts. So I think damn well they have an incredibly good shot of being there again next year. Right? I really, really wouldn't be surprised. There are only 2 teams in my eyes, at least from the West, that might give them a good chance. Mainly Edmonton, if they can do it. I would actually just stick to mainly Edmonton, right? If Edmonton can kind of, make that next step. I know we always say, especially with Edmonton, kind of the Leafs too, but for most teams, but mainly Edmonton, make that next step, then they can do it. Now, what's their next step? Maybe figure out their goaltending situation, maybe get one more impact defenseman. There's a couple things maybe, but if they can do that, then they can damn well compete with Vegas because that was a good series. That was an excellent series even. So it'll be tight. But for that reason, I think all they got to do is, it's kind of between them. Obviously, there's some great teams in the West still too. But, I mean, those are the 2 powerhouses in my eyes. And I think that they'll be fighting against each other every year, for the next few years. So we'll see about that. But now this is another question I've been asking myself. And Mr. Goaltender Alex, I got to ask you. So Bobrovsky came out of nowhere. Well, not out of nowhere, but, he was this good once upon a time. And once upon a time wasn't that long ago. But let's not forget, they still have Spencer Knight, right, who's supposed to be this next Carey Price, you know what I mean, and the next future goalie of the league. What do you do? They have, and realistically, Alex Lyon was, we like to use the term serviceable, but I think he was a little bit more than serviceable. He was a good goalie. He held his own when he needed to. So they have 3 good goalies in there. Who's your starting 2? Who's your starter and backup next year, Alex? What do you got?
Yeah, it definitely comes down to what their internal meetings, what the word is on Spencer Knight. Obviously, he went through some issues this year and worked on clearing them up. It's all about where he's at. Because if you can get value for Bobrovsky and get out from that contract,
Yeah.
You talk about him coming out of nowhere because he also had a season where he was a bottom 10 goalie in the league, and like that's including backups, right? He's had these roller coaster times, and when he's great, rounds 1 through 3. I mean, between him and Matt Tkachuk, that's where those were basically won. It feels like
that's the team. Yeah, goals, that was the team,
right? And Bobrovsky saving everything. So if you can get value for him and Spencer Knight's good to go for next year, and you can really work on insulating him, making him feel good. And if you got Alex Lyon there, like you're saying, if he's serviceable / a bit better than serviceable, I think that'd be a great tandem to run next year. And whatever cap you can save off of Sergei Bobrovsky, I mean, you can deploy that somewhere else, right? Exactly. We're seeing some buyouts possibly happen in the NHL. There's some decent players available. We've heard some words from Toronto about some UFAs not coming back. Some of those guys would fit on that gritty kind of Florida team, right? I think if you can deploy that cap capital a little bit better and not pay a ton to get rid of or move on from Sergei Bobrovsky's contract, I think they absolutely should do it if Spencer Knight can play next year. If there's more issues there and he's not able to play, you don't want to walk into the season with Alex Lyon. And I mean, I'd have to go back to Cap Friendly to figure out who's number 4 there, right? Yeah. You can't walk into that without it. So if there's a swap for Bobrovsky and, maybe you hold back $1 million a cap and you pick up a goalie and it works, like there can be ways to be creative and still get ahead in that deal. And I don't think you can't bank on having that level of Bobrovsky. You saw it fizzle out in round 4. I mean, maybe the team was just a bit too injured and you needed that. They were getting peppered with shots and not playing a complete super amazing team at all points in those rounds. And it really was, to me, Bobrovsky, that ultimate difference maker. So that ran out in the finals. And I don't think you can't bank on that showing back up just in time for next year's playoffs. What if it shows up in November to December and now you finish 7th and he's not there for the playoff, Yeah, it's just too many variables, and if you can get less variables on a $10 million contract, I think a Jack Eichel type contract. That's what you want. A guy that game in, game out is going to be a gamer, right?
Yeah, that's the thing for me too, right? It's like Bobrovsky. This would be the time to really look to move him, right? Because I mean, look how he didn't play in the playoffs. Aside from the final, which he was still decent, he was still okay. But I mean, Vegas that's a hard team to beat. So I think now would be the smart time because personally, I think Spencer Knight is that guy, right? I think he will be a future top 3 goalie in the league. Right? He's still 22, I think. Like he's incredibly good, and he's shown that he's very, very good so far as a bloody 20-year-old, right? Like that's solid. So I think if they can move that, what is it, $10.5 or $11 million from Bobrovsky, it's a lot of money, right? Exactly. Like you said, you can put that into more depth, right? Add more guys that can, help the team out, right? Get another defenseman, get another forward, you know what I mean? Like, and then run Knight and Lyon next year. Or if whatever happens with Lyon, get another backup. But I think Knight should be the starter if they can manage to move Bobrovsky for a good deal. Now, Bobrovsky's stock is clearly up high right now, right? Again, look at how he played, right? You can get, hopefully, a very nice return for him, right? It's just, again, it's a healthy contract, but they can make it work. I'm sure, the management of Florida can make it work, right? So I think now would be the smartest time to kind of say, hey, who wants Bobrovsky? Especially because Hellebuyck is the talk of the town right now. Right, Hellebuyck is kind of the one up, and then Bobrovsky. It's like, hey, you didn't get Hellebuyck, but you want Bobrovsky? He's pretty good still too, So it's a little bit more expensive, but I mean, hey, could be worth it, right? Maybe they look and get a nice deal. We'll see what happens. But yeah, so
can I add one more thing on that? Because I think if they are trying to trade Bobrovsky, they would be really good to just do as much as they can to clear the cap. Like I was saying about going in on UFAs, of just adding value to your team. If you can get positive value from Bobrovsky, because I know his value's up, man. His value's definitely up. I just don't know that it's getting quality assets back just based on the still possible question mark, the history of the up and down to him. It's like, okay, so now is it going down? You just got the uptime. But besides that, it's just the $10 million, right? But if they can go into free agency, say they give you a 2nd round pick for him this year, right? Recoup a single draft pick, go into free agency, and now you spend $6 million on a forward, probably a second liner or so. And Michael Bunting is going to be about that, but probably less, right? Yep. You add a Michael Bunting and you add a $4 million defenseman to your lineup. And now you're every single day, every night lineup, like you're saying, it's just that much more built out with depth.
Yeah.
So I definitely see it.
Yeah, I mean, like you can do that, yeah, but then you got to bank on you getting these guys, right? But now you get a guy like Bunting and let's say a top 4, even a top 6 defenseman. Florida just made it to the Cup final, and it's Florida. No state tax is quite nice, so I'm pretty sure they wouldn't mind going to play there. So that's actually not a bad idea at all. And then even if they really want to, they can flip that bloody second or whatever pick. Maybe they can squeak a late first or an early second, whatever. But I like that too. I think that's a pretty good idea. I think that wouldn't be bad at all. But so that's our wrap on the playoffs. But we're gonna take a look at our call your shot. So I made a little bit of a final conclusion here. So we went through the second round in conference final. We tied in the first round. I won the the second round. I won the conference finals. So we did a ×2 if you called the right amount of games. So Alex got Vegas to win in 5, so that's 2. And as you can tell, we finished in a 4-4 tie. How's it going, buddy? Great minds think alike, buddy.
Yeah, from that second round on, it just felt like it was a bit destined. And I mean, you had both answers right in the finals, but the team just came through.
Yep. I was looking at it. I'm like, you know what? Like, I watched the first game, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be wrong here. But I mean, hey, anything could happen. But yeah, I honestly, man, like, people say like, oh, this was the best playoffs in a long time. But it seems like they always say that. But you know what? Like, kind of thinking back, this is kind of the best playoffs I've seen in a long time, right? Like, every single series was above good, right? I don't think there was a single bad series, right? Like, even like, and there was only one sweep, which I don't have the numbers or the stats in front of me, but when was the last time that happened? When there was only one sweep in a playoffs, right? Probably a good amount of time, maybe, or just put my foot in my mouth, but whatever. Like, it seems like, whatever, but every single series was awesome. I thought it was great. Super fast-paced hockey, literally physical, exactly what you want to see from that playoff hockey, right? I had an awesome time. So on the whole, what'd you think of the entire playoffs, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, we saw a lot of good hockey from a lot of teams. I wish the reffing maybe wasn't as much of a narrative as it ended up being here and there. I mean, the charts that people are making showing the amount of calls in games 1, 2, 3, and then how it drops significantly for 4, 5, 6. It's like it's just seeing that there's so much of a storyline that they're given to play with, right? Of keep it close. If it's not an egregious one, you don't call it in the later half of the play. I wish we'd see some consistency from that aspect, because I agree, man. The hockey, the players, they're only getting more skilled and better, right? Mm-hmm. The only thing I could have wanted a bit more was a couple closer games in the finals, and the finals going as long as possible, right? Just because you want more hockey, right? It's about to end. It is truly the best hockey of the year. So no, it was still a great time. I loved watching it. I'll be back watching next year. Can't get rid of me like that.
Yeah, no, it can happen. Yeah, I mean, we had everything. We had great goals. Great. There was a couple scraps, maybe a fair bit of them. A couple suspensions and attempted murder. And there was a bunch of stuff, man. It was awesome. It was a great time. I had so much fun in these playoffs. But the good part about the playoffs being over is that we get to move to talks of the draft. So Alex and I love the draft. Oh, we love it. Young players, good time. Future of the game, man. They're the best. So what we're going to do today is we're going to predict our top 5 picks from this coming year's NHL draft. So little picture here of who has what. So the top 5, Chicago, whatever, Anaheim, Columbus, San Jose, and Montreal. So we'll start with our number 1. I think it's probably not going to be Bedard, but I'll put him on there just for the sake of putting him on there. So my number 1, Bedard. Alex, I assume?
Yes, sir. It's definitely Connor Bedard. No ifs, ands, or buts. He's going to be, I call it, at least a point a game player next season.
It's Jake Gardiner. He's redeclaring for the draft. He's coming back. He's going to go number 1. Connor Bedard. All right. I took number 1. Alex, what you got number 2?
So for number 2, I'm sticking with who I believe is the true second best player in the draft, and that's Matvei Michkov. I believe that talent, the Russian fact, there's factors to it, but I think for 2 reasons that the talent is the second best in the draft to me, and Anaheim is a team that doesn't need to have that player on their roster next season. They are one of the teams to me that's primed to just be patient for a minute and then have maybe a top 5 player in the league show up in 2 to 3 years. I think he's got 3 years left on his deal in Russia. So he's going to be, I think the projection is he's going to be a 21-year-old on an ELC with that team. Man, he had a couple years of development to Zegras in them. I wouldn't blame them for picking one of these other top forwards, but he's number 2 for me.
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think about that because he was playing for St. Petersburg and Sochi. So I think he would be 21 by the time he's good to go. But that's a good point. I didn't think about that. They don't necessarily need that guy right now, right? But I took Fantilli second. I think he's going to be a perfect fit for this team. I can't wait to see what he can do with how many L's do I have in there. He's going to be awesome with them. Like, I'm stoked. I think he's a perfect match. Like, he killed it at Michigan. He was 36 points, 30 goals, 35 assists for 65 points. Come on, that's solid. And he's not a smaller guy, right? Everyone, I think some people think, oh, he's a little bit of a smaller guy. He's not small. He's 6'2", 187. Right, you're 6'2". That's pretty good. At 18 years old, you're gonna, or 19, I think he is, or whatever. But you're gonna fill into that weight, right? You get to the NHL, and honestly, even then, 187 isn't small. I mean, it's not me, but I mean, whatever. But I like that. So for 3, that's where I'm taking Michkov. I think Michkov will end up being. I know there's a lot of talk about Michkov going second, but I just think for me, it's the size, right? He is quite small. It's 5'10", which isn't that short, but he's 148, right? You can fill into that, sure, but you're going to add like 30, 40 pounds. That's kind of a lot, right? Now, okay, clearly he's not really losing because of his size because he is playing in the K, which is bloody men, right? And 42 games, 34 points, 19 goals, and 15 assists. Clearly, his size is not really faltering him, but I kind of have this feeling that a team like Anaheim, they're like, hey, we already have a lot of small guys. We kind of need someone a little bit bigger, right? In our forward group, at least. So that's why I think they'll take Fantilli over Michkov, but honestly, either or, you're pretty good. So, Alex, who do you have third?
Yeah, so that's where I jump in. I do have Fantilli third. I wouldn't blame the Ducks for taking him. It's definitely a great player and somebody that you'll get to have a bit better of an eye on yourself over the next couple of years. I don't worry really about Michkov's size. I think he is just a younger player. He'll have time to really be able to hit the weights and pack on the protein to pack on the muscles. But no, Fantilli, super solid player. I think the Blue Jackets would absolutely love for him to drop to them at 3, and they would be running up to submit that pick because he'd really help out their center depth.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
And if like, I guess I'll jump into it whenever I do have my next couple picks, but I think between him and the other center that's at the top of this draft, they're going to be happy to grab either one of them. So I do think that if Michkov doesn't go 2, I don't know that Columbus is the team that would pick him. I think they'd probably pass on him.
That's another thing too, right? It's like Columbus is tough because they have a lot of centers, right? They like guys that can kind of play both. You got KJ, you got Sillinger, right? Like, and then they still have their guys there, Boone Jenner, right? Like, Roslovic is there too. Like, they have a lot of centers, right? So I think maybe that's why I had them. Obviously I just think Anaheim would be taking Fantilli, right? But that's kind of why I gave them Michkov, because they need that wing, right? Another star wing guy. But then again, Kent Johnson and Sillinger can still play both, right? So Alex, you have a 4.
At 4, this is where I'm leaning on Gabe Foley from Recruit Scouting. I follow his work quite a bit, but they've got Zach Benson up super high here, and I'm going to slot him into the 4 slot. I think his dynamic skill and his tenacity is, he's like, I'll call him a very skilled Michael Bunting type. Like, he's in the corners first, right? He's going to beat you for that puck, but then he's going to drive the net and he's going to finish with it, right? And I think that kind of I guess the word I'm really stuck on is tenacity with the player. And that I want the puck back and I want to put it in your net, right? That's just a player with that skill, that speed. I like the guy I'm going to take next at 5, but I think that just dynamic, that you really like those flashes you can see, right? And I think that's what separates him and pushes him above my next guy.
Yeah, honestly, and that tenacity is actually such a good word to describe Benson. He is a bulldog. Like, he's not afraid to get into every single play. I love him about that too. Unfortunately, he's not my top 5, spoiler alert, but he's a little bit past that. But so for my number 4, I got Leo Carlson. I think he's going to be, honestly, such a good player that I was kind of like teetering, right? And I'm like, is it going to be Michkov at 3 or is it going to be Carlson at 3? And the only thing that kind of pushed me towards Michkov is because he's a wing, right? Carlson does play both, but I think he's a pure center, right? And he's a bit of a bigger dude too, man. Like 6'3", 194, right? Can fill into that for sure. 6'3" is already pretty damn good, right? Imagine if he adds another 10 pounds, something like that. He's going to be a pretty good guy. And San Jose, I think, is a perfect fit for him. Perfect. They love their Euro guys. So I think he'll be perfect fit. And I can't wait to see. I mean, the guy's put up some great points. You know, he's playing in the SHL right now. He's a stud in international gameplay. So I'm super excited to see what he can do. And I think he could potentially end up being, when they do, 10 years from now, when they do the 2023 redraft, he might slot in at number 2, personally. But we'll have to see how that one goes. So my 5, everyone is kind of saying, okay, I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe people think he's going to slip. But for me, it's Will Smith. Will Smith is an absolute monster. So and obviously not the actor, but he's in the U.S. Men's National. This guy is a fucking point machine. Like, he is crazy amount of points. Like, total points, he's got 169 points in 80 games. That's pretty good. Not bad. And he's 6 foot. 172 is a little bit thin, but again, that's only 10 pounds. And you're at a good NHL size. Maybe if he wants to get a little bit beefier, another 20 pounds, 15 pounds, and you're good. And I kind of think he's a perfect fit because this guy can play anywhere, right? Anywhere up front. I think he's a perfect fit for Montreal. Say, hey, we got another young stud of a prospect, and we can put him wherever we want, right? I think he's going to be a great fit for Montreal, but we'll have to see how that one goes too. So, Alex, who do you have at 5?
At 5, I'm taking Carlson. To me, he's definitely a part of that group. The other things that I didn't like as much, and why wow, can't talk right now, but why I had him ranked just a little bit lower is definitely that big size is a plus, but he's got to pick up, I mean, to me, the foot speed a little bit with it. Obviously, lots of time to do that, right? I think some foot speed is something he can develop, and his vision for the game, like, to me, he could be a better version of David Krejci, like a super solid centerman that can, I'd have him on my second line forever, kind of thing. And I don't know if he's got that game breaking number 1 center, and that's where Benson, to me, does have that more feeling of a number 1 winger kind of thing, right? That number 1 line kind of player. Whereas I think Carlson, as he develops in his career, he's going to be this big, nasty to play against, this super skilled, like a Joe Thornton type passing. Like, he's got a great vision for the game, and that's really shown at a couple world competitions he's played at. And I think if he goes to Montreal there at 5, that would be an amazing piece to
so nice for them, man. That would be great for them too. I'd love to see that happen. I mean, okay, I'm one of those anomaly guys that, like, everyone's like, oh, every Leaf fan has to hate the Habs. Like, no, I like the Habs, man. I think they're a very good team, and they're gonna have an excellent future. So he would be awesome to have there for sure. But I'm kind of surprised. I'm a little disappointed, but I mean, hey, the talent's so good. I don't know how many defensemen are going to get taken in this first round. I cannot see a world where there's one taken in the top 5, but I mean, hey, it's just because there's so much offensive firepower. It's awesome. This is going to be such a good draft.
I think this is the kind of draft, though, where we see a couple years down the line, we're like, man, Thomas Chabot was he, pick 17, right? Yeah. And it's like, really, that dude was a pick 17 guy, like David Reinbacher. Tom Willander, Axel Sandin Pellikka. They're all going to go in the first round, but you're right. They don't really project right now into that top 5. Maybe they're cracking top 10. Maybe that's if you're leaning team need, right? Philadelphia's moved out a defenseman recently. Maybe they look at top D off the board. Yep. But I think we're really going to see that these guys do have some skill. Fine, maybe the top 5 is what it is because it is just so elite with these forwards this year. Yep. That's fine. There's nothing really wrong with that, right? And these defensive prospects aren't that super game breaking offensive side like that Rasmus Dahlin that really pushes them into that top of the draft conversation. I think, though, we're really going to look back on it and be like, man, David Reinbacher went 13th. Like, how did that happen?
He's so good. I would honestly, like, this is the thing, like, I really, really, really wouldn't be surprised if Montreal stretched and picked up Reinbacher. I really wouldn't be, like Montreal does have some great defensive prospects that are playing in the NHL, except for Lane Hudson. And I think Lane Hudson will end up being the best. But you got Lane Hudson, you got Jordan Harris, you got freaking Xhekaj, who I bloody love that guy. Oh, he's one of my favorite dudes right now. He's the best. And then, Dustin Barron, like they have really good young defensemen, right? Like I really wouldn't be surprised if, again, they stretched and picked up Reinbacher or a defenseman that they feel is the best in the draft. Do I think they're going to do it? No, not really. Maybe they look to move it down a little bit, and get some assets, whatever, maybe. But, I mean, because Montreal is just kind of stacked with prospects right now. So anything can happen there. But I think regardless, this is going to be a good draft years down the line, right? 10 years down the road when they're doing the redraft, everyone loves to do the redraft, which we'll probably do eventually for the what was the one with the 2015 draft? That's the fun one. So yeah,
the Chabot draft.
There you go. Exactly, right? So, I think they would probably take Chabot a little bit higher. But anyways, yeah, it's looking so deep, right? Through the whole first round. The whole first round looks terrific, right? So I'm so excited to really see what's going to happen in this draft. I can't wait. It's on the 29th, I believe, or something like that. So we'll have an episode.
Thursday.
Something like that, yeah. We'll have an episode covering it for sure, without a question, because again, Alex and I love the draft, so that's fun. But yeah, so until then, happy kind of end of the NHL season, and on to the new one with all the young, studs and the fun kids and everything. But until then, we'll catch you on another episode. Thanks everybody for listening.